Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park. Programs are produced independently by members of the community. The City of Highland Park is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of the City of Highland Park.
Hello, and welcome to Let's Just Talk with me, Sandra Kahn. As I say at the beginning of each show, I'm not an entertainer, I'm not a journalist, I'm a psychotherapist. And I kind of ask questions from a different point of view. I'm very excited about today's show because we have with us someone who is uber famous. We have one of the nation's leading dermatologists in the country here with us today. And it's so timely because this week's Time magazine, of all things, as if they knew I was doing this show, it's called Nip, Tuck, or Else. Now everyone gets work done. Will you? And that's a question, as more and more people today are using procedures, and we're going to be talking about injectable procedures today. And actually, our guest is going to perform on camera some injectable procedures, namely Botox. So, let me get started and let me introduce our guest. Sitting next to me is our subject, and his name is Eric, and he has volunteered his time to have these lines taken out of his forehead by our wonderful guest, Dr. Sheeman, who was chosen as the Chicago Dermatological Society's Practitioner of the Year in 2012. He is one of the leading experts on Botox. And today we're going to find out from the doctor who, what, and why people use injectables. And very quickly is his lovely, attractive nurse, Manny, who is his assistant, his medical assistant, and she's going to be assisting the doctor as he does the procedures. So, welcome, Dr. Sheeman, and thank you so much for appearing today's show. I overheard you say that you have done this procedure on camera one other time. Can you tell us what that was?
Well, that was interesting. I got invited to India because now in India there's more disposable income than there was several years ago with the economy, and there's dermatologists that are now starting to do cosmetic procedures, and they needed somebody to show them how to do it. So I got invited over to India. And while I was there, at the last moment, they said, would you do a live demonstration on screen? No good lighting, a clique light in my face, syringes I was not used to. That was interesting, but it worked.
But one of the things you do, doctor, is you actually teach techniques to using these injectables. And you were a professor at Johns Hopkins and currently at Northwestern, is that correct?
I'm an associate professor at Northwestern.
Associate professor. Good enough for me. And I want to ask you about these Botox parties that people are having. And I'm not exactly sure who's doing the Botox or the Restylane. What kind of person should be doing these procedures on people?
Well, first of all, Botox parties have been something that I've never really liked the idea of. We tried for a short time. My office was invited to do these procedures in a salon. And it lasted just a couple of weeks because I realized you need the right lighting, you need the right cleanliness, you need the right space. You have to be able to see what you're doing. You have to do it in a medically sound manner. And I don't really feel you can do that in a living room. The people doing the procedures, the company that makes Botox has always felt that the people that should be doing these are board certified plastic surgeons, dermatologists, ENT doctors, and ophthalmologists, because they all know the anatomy fairly well. In reality, a lot of places are having nurses do it and nurse practitioners doing that, which if they're well enough trained, that's okay, but we don't. In my office, we just have doctors doing it. It's gotten to the point where a lot of specialties that probably don't have training are doing this and offering inexpensive prices to get people in the door, or places having assistants or estheticians doing that, and that probably is not a great idea in my opinion.
Yeah. What can go wrong with these kinds of procedures?
Well, with the areas that we're going to be doing today, you can get eyelid droop, so that you can get drooping of an eyebrow or an eyelid that can be pretty severe.
So you really have to be a technician to know how not to get that.
You really need to know the anatomy, and it isn't really one size fits all. You want to individualize it to the particular patient and where their muscles move, but do it in a way where you're not going to get into trouble.
So you would recommend that somebody in the medical profession do these procedures?
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, since we are a senior network here, and I call the show Turning Back Time, what about seniors getting rid of these lines that bother us all? How do you feel about that?
I think that at any age, things that we do cosmetically can be of benefit. I think the emphasis should be not getting rid of the lines, but maybe softening them. The analogy comes up with teenagers with acne. When I first got into cosmetics, I really wondered whether or not with a medical education I even wanted to get involved in this. And my wife at the time pointed out to me that think of how much your self-image as a teenager affects everything you do subsequently in life. The confidence you have, the way you perform in college and in the job market afterwards, and how much your self-image is important. And she pointed out this is really the adult version of the same thing. With people in an older age group, I really think it's a mistake to try to make yourself look 30. When I see somebody that does that.
I've seen people who have tried that, and it's kind of like seeing an 85-year-old woman in tight blue jeans. I mean, it's just something's wrong with that picture.
Well, I don't know what comes to your mind, but when I see somebody trying to do that, the first thing that comes to my mind is, wow, isn't that sad?
Yes.
And that's not what you want to be. But I think if you take the same individual and you say, okay, what is it that when you look in the mirror keeps you from feeling vibrant, alive, and feeling good about yourself? Is there some small thing that you can change that if you made a little bit of an improvement in, you'd wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, gosh, I feel great. I'm ready to go for the day. I feel great for the age of life that I'm at. And that somebody will look at you and say, okay, for age whatever you are, doesn't he or she look great? That's who you want to be.
I love that answer. I really do, because I think people who do this to try and look like movie stars or someone they're not. But I love your philosophy on this, that when you look in the mirror, that you feel better about yourself and that you don't necessarily look like a different person. But, and I know the techniques you use are, particularly on seniors, are a softer look, because I think as we age, we get, I know sometimes I look mean, and I'm not mean, but because of these lines here, and when you see seniors, some of them really look mean, and they're not, but it's just the way that they've aged. But you can make that disappear.
I think the lines that you see between the brow usually are caused in most people by being nearsighted and squinting. But we perceive them as being angry or harsh.
Right.
And you just don't want to be that person. You want to have people look at you and see somebody that looks kind, especially in your profession. As a psychotherapist, you want somebody to feel that you're listening to them, but you don't want them to feel that you're judging them or being harsh, and those lines can create that perception.
Yeah. One of the things that I've recently read is that people are much more open, women, about having these procedures done, whereas 10, 15 years ago, people would hide and not tell anybody. Now women are communicating with each other about it, and it's becoming part of our culture.
I think that's probably true, and we're seeing a lot more men doing it as well. I think that part of it is that, at least in my philosophy, it's all about doing it in a way that isn't obvious. I don't want anybody to be able to look at him when I get done and say, nice Botox. I want him to say, wow, he looks relaxed. You're looking great these days. I don't know what it is, but you really look good. And I can't quite put my finger on it. Then I've done a good job.
You realize how many people you make happy. I don't know if you ever thought of that when you went into the medical profession, but you really, I've seen some of your work, and you really make people feel so much better about themselves. And interestingly enough, attractive people make over a lifetime $230,000 more than unattractive people. So there is something to say about our society, our culture, that does perceive looking good, not necessarily handsome or gorgeous, but just looking good as a real positive.
Unfortunately, we are an appearance-based society. I remember I have a brother-in-law who's a very nice-looking gentleman, but he was telling me that I was complaining about paying for a very expensive haircut. And he said to me, it's worth it. He's 10 years older than me, competing with people half my age, and I need to go in there and look like I'm young, vibrant, and that I can compete with these young people when I go into the job place. All this cosmetic stuff, the same thing is true. We're trying to put our best foot forward and to feel good about ourselves, and also have other people say, gosh, this person is vibrant and alive and able to do what they need to do.
Yes. Let's go to Eric, who is our subject today.
Mm-hmm.
And what made you want to do the Botox?
Well, I'm getting old,
Okay.
so that's pretty much it. It's just something that bothers me. I have a hairstyle, you can see, and my forehead is a big part of my hairstyle, and they're pretty bad. And when I in here and these lines in here, it's actually uncomfortable. It's not just the looks. It's actually uncomfortable. It feels like my skin's crunching up. So it sounds like something that would be exciting for me. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, I was in Vegas about 6 months ago, and we were with a bunch of guys, and we were having some fun, and we were screaming girls' names, just guessing names, and finally one of them, a group of girls, I guessed the right name, and I'm like, hi, how do you know me? I'm like pretending I know her. And then I explained to them what I was doing, and they laughed, and they said, oh, I thought you were my father's friend. And I was like, oh.
So that did it.
That really felt,
you.
I don't like, in my mind, I'm 30 years old. I don't like looking like someone's dad. It was the first time I was referred to as someone's dad, so.
So I think that's kind of a legitimate reason. So who do you see primarily in your office at this time, doctor? I mean, what's the ages of the patients that you're seeing?
We get the whole gamut. I mean, we see people as young as in their 20s if they're really nearsighted and they've ended up getting a vertical line or two vertical lines between
Mm-hmm.
their brows at an early age. We see people in their 30s and 40s that are teachers that have to look stern, and so they're like this to tell the kids they need business, and they get those lines. And then we see a tremendous number in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and early 70s. And then we get a few that are a lot older than that. I have one lady that comes in her 90s who says, I know my friends tell me that this may be silly, but I don't listen to them. I feel good. This is my hobby.
Great. And really what people are saying to people who do the procedures of all ages are, I think what they said years ago was, do you really need that, or what a waste? But now people are saying, good for you. And I think that's great. So right now, doctor, you're going to be doing the procedure for us on Eric. And if you could explain now, before you start, what exactly you're going to be doing.
Okay, I'm going to have my assistant come around and point as we explain this. But
Okay.
Eric has two places that he wants to work on. He wanted to do between the brows, and he wanted to do across the lower forehead. Now, when we do this, at least the way that we do it, we like to mark things out ahead of time. If we do that, we can have them relaxed. It hurts less when we do it. We're less likely to get any bruising. And we can make sure that we're high enough above the brow, which is important, so that we don't get side effects such as brow droop or eyelid droop. So we already took Eric before the show and marked him out ahead of time. So he wouldn't normally look like that. We just use an eyeliner marker to put where we want to inject. We also, before we came in, did the usual hand washing and sanitizing, which you won't see on the screen, but it should be done in a medically sound fashion. And then these are very small injections. We can just go across and inject the sites very quickly. It's not a very painful procedure. We put a little bit of ice on beforehand, which we'll do as we do the procedure to make it even less uncomfortable. But it's pretty quick and easy once you've marked out the landmarks, which we did in advance.
Okay, so let's get started.
Okay.
And I have to tell you, we are so fortunate to have Dr. Sheeman do this for us because he has appeared on 2020, all the major TV shows, national TV shows, and is really considered a major expert in this field. And he's been so kind to come and show us today how it's done. So, if you could explain
Now
as
the
you go along.
procedure,
Yeah.
as we actually do it, is going to seem incredibly simple because we already did all the hard work ahead of time. So now at this point, she is just going to dab these areas and make sure that they are clean.
Okay.
And after that, we're going to ice each area, and she'll move across. Each one that I do, she'll move across with the ice pack to the next area so that it's not too uncomfortable for him. We'll start with the area between the brows. I'm going to have you turn just a little bit this way. And she's going to ice you. Let us know when it's cold but not painful. Keep a little bit turned over towards me.
Okay.
Are you nervous, Eric?
No.
Oh, good.
Feeling cold or?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so this will just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So people have wondered if this is a painful procedure. You know, people particularly who are afraid of needles, but it really isn't.
No, it doesn't hurt at all.
I mean, he's feeling it a little bit. He's being stoic about it, but it is not terrible. You can see that he's not really having any major discomfort. There's no frowning or grimacing. It's not too bad.
So,
We use a very small needle.
Yes, for people who are frightened of needles, or because it is a needle, they are afraid it's going to be very painful. No, it's not. And I've had Restylane myself, and I can assure you personally that it is not painful at all. And it's like magic, because you have the injections, and then 5 minutes later you get up and look in the mirror and your lines are gone. And that's why I think another name for the doctor should be Svengali, because it is like magic. And as he said that, and as I believe as a therapist, when you feel good about yourself, when you look in the mirror and you feel good, it affects you emotionally. You enjoy life more, believe it or not, by feeling like you look good, and particularly for seniors. I think it really does turn back the clock.
Well, it certainly makes you look better for where your clock is at the time. So that's important. I want to mention one other thing. These lines here, relax your forehead as much as you can. Can we pan over to him one more time here?
Here, let me look this way.
There's still going to be lines there at rest. This takes 2 to 10 days to kick in. And those lines that are there at rest when he's totally relaxed, because they've been folded in for a long time, they're almost like a crease, those will still be there. Everything will be about 80% better, but there'll still be a little bit of a line. So what we will do a lot of times when somebody's been having these there for a long time and they're sort of folded in, we may have them come back about 2 weeks later, and we'll use just a little bit of filler, like Restylane, which was just mentioned, and we'll go in and we'll fill those residual lines to get rid of 80 or 90% of what still remains. But over time, because I used to have lines just like these on my forehead, I've been doing Botox for a while now at this point, they will, unlike a piece of paper, they will relax over time and they will completely disappear over time.
And I've heard that some of the procedures, I've heard about Restylane, that ultimately it kind of blends in with the body, and you don't have to have it done as much as you think you have to have it done.
Well, almost all the fillers that we use nowadays are a substance called hyaluronic acid, which is something found naturally in the skin. And the body really cannot tell the hyaluronic acid from its own, so it's a very, very safe procedure. We don't see allergic reactions or very many problems at all with those fillers. And the body will metabolize hyaluronic acid thinking it's its own. So it will gradually disappear, so it's not a permanent thing. We believe from certain studies that as much as 20% of it may remain each time that we do it. So that goes along with what you were saying, that over time, some of the effect is more permanent.
So if one started, let's say, at age 50 and came once a year or every 6 months, I mean, how frequently do people have to come to have these lines removed?
Well, let's say hypothetically that they were doing both filler, like Restylane, and Botox. Botox typically wears off after a few months, but if you don't train your muscle, if you don't look in the mirror and try to see if it's ready to move again, if it's worn off, you've forgotten how to use it because you've broken the habit for several months. In addition to that, that muscle is weakened from disuse. So oftentimes, after a few times doing this, you will forget how to use the muscle, and you can go far longer than 3 months, sometimes 6, 9, even a year in some cases, without doing it again because you don't go back to using the muscle again. And the more you don't use it, the weaker it gets. But if you were doing both together, I tend to have people come in a little bit before the filler totally wears off, so you don't look better and then worse and then better than worse, that it comes down just a little bit and then we don't need to use as much and we get you back to looking optimal. So I have them come back a little bit early for filler and a little bit late for Botox. So somewhere around 4.5 or 5 months apart is what I usually do if people are doing both.
And do you think, I know that the procedures are costly, do you think as they become more and more popular that the price will drop?
That hasn't seemed to happen too much, unfortunately. I think the places where you see bargains are places where people that shouldn't be doing the procedure are doing them. But in general, I think you have to go with the philosophy of the doctor that's doing the procedure. My philosophy is I don't try to do everything. I don't want somebody to look ridiculous. I don't want them to go into the poorhouse. So to me, if you really have somebody who will honor your wishes and just do what's important to you, do a little bit. Try to make it at least cost effective. These aren't inexpensive procedures, but you can do them in a cost effective manner where they don't cost a fortune, and you can do 1 or 2 things that make you feel good about yourself. That's sort of a responsible way of doing these things.
Excellent. I think that people feel that once they start to do this, that it's going to happen so frequently that they have to keep going back and back. But you're not saying that. You're saying kind of, if you keep it up, you'll keep the costs down, and you won't have to keep coming back, and it can be affordable.
Yeah, the point you just made is important. If you do this on an ongoing basis, usually over time you need less. So you might need a lower dose of Botox, a lower amount of filler, and if you keep it up, that's what you were implying, and you maintain it, that the cost is going to be substantially less than if you let it wear off and start from scratch again.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, I noticed that the cheekbones seem to be very popular now, that people are having, we just think of them, or I do, kind of as being like Eric, taking the lines out, or here, but building up cheekbones. Tell me about that.
Well, that's something new and relatively exciting. For a while there, people were using the traditional fillers like Restylane that are more line fillers for this purpose, and it really did not look very good, and it was very expensive, didn't last very long. The first filler that came out that you could actually augment the face and sort of fill the balloon back up again that has sort of deflated over the years was one called Sculptra. And that was something that stimulated new collagen. There's a newer one that's out, though, that is more exciting. It actually is a filler very similar to Restylane and Juvederm and some of the other line fillers, but instead of filling lines, it gives you volume. And that one's called Voluma, appropriately enough. And it's something that's very easily injected into the cheeks to just sort of bring everything out. We tend to go like this over the years, where our face sort of decreases in volume, and it really makes things look more youthful if you just fill out the balloon, make it more like that almond shape that you had when you were 15.
How new is this?
That came out, I believe, March of last year, I believe it was. So we've only had it for about a little over a year.
Yeah. Can you look into the future, doctor, and tell us what you think will be, let's say, in 10 years from now? What do you think we will have? Because progress in every field is just moving so fast.
Well, I'm not sure I'm bright enough to predict out 10 years. I can predict what's coming next, though.
Okay.
There was just a new product approved by the FDA for dissolving fat underneath the chin.
Oh my goodness.
And it's just FDA approved. We haven't even started doing it yet at this point, but it looks like it's going to be a fairly safe procedure. Doctors were doing it off-label before the FDA put a stop to that a while back. So there was some doctors in this country have had some experience doing it, and but now it's gone through all the appropriate trials. It's FDA approved for at least under the chin. Now, if you want to go out 10 years, I imagine that sooner or later they're going to use it to dissolve fat under the eyes too. So it's an exciting new product. It causes a little bit of inflammation, so the skin tightens as well, so you don't end up dissolving the fat and having loose hanging skin there. It's pretty exciting. It's going to be an injectable rather than a machine or a surgical procedure to get rid of excess fat here and probably eventually here.
Oh my goodness, it almost sounds like magic. And I wonder if we could go in a time machine and go 100 years from now. Maybe everybody will look 40. The whole society will look 40 because of all these procedures that are being developed. And I want to thank you so much, Doctor, for taking your time to come up here. And thank you. You were a great assistant. And Eric, thank you for volunteering for this. And I hope and I know that everybody has learned something. And I am going to encourage all the seniors out there not to be afraid. And there is a way that when you look in the mirror and you say, I hate this line, that you can go see Dr. Sheenan or somebody board certified and have that line removed because, hey, this is the new century. So, thank you so much, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doctor, thank you. And it's been a very exciting afternoon. And I've learned a lot, and I hope all of you have learned a lot, because that's what we're about. Getting better, getting healthier, mentally, physically, in all ways, so we can experience the joy of living to its fullest. Bye now.